So the ending of 28 years later is definitely a bit of an odd one. We're going to delve straight into spoiler territory here. We're going to talk about that ending. So if you haven't seen 28 years later, do not watch this video. I repeat, if you have not seen 28 years later, do not watch this video. Go see the movie, then come back and watch this video. If you want to see my spoiler-free review of the movie, I'll link that below in the description. But from here on out, we are delving into massive spoiler territory for 28 years later. So you've just watched the movie 28 years later. It's a fairly somber, borderline melancholic movie about family, about loss, about community, and of course, about zombies. Well, rage-infected people, if we're not using the Z word, even though a character in this movie uses the Z word. I think it's safe to say we're allowed to call them zombies now. The movie ends with Spike, our lead character, the young lad played by Alfie Williams, leaving the community, leaving the island community, leaving the baby on the doorstep, as it were, and going off on his own and being a bit of a lone wolf. He's travelling along whatever road he's travelling along, gets to a bit of a blockade. Some infected start making their way towards him. He takes care of the first couple of them, like Katniss Everdeen, no problem at all. But then there's a few too many for him to handle, and coming to his rescue is the Jimmy Gang. Now, I'm not sure if that's what they're actually going to be called, but that's what I'm going to call them in this video. They are a Power Rangers-esque, parkour-loving, zombie-killing squad cosplaying as Jimmy Savile / Teletubbies, led by none other than Jack O'Connell. Like I said, it's a very odd ending. It's very tonally out of place from the rest of the movie. I don't think that's an accident. I think that's on purpose. But let's delve into the why, at least the potential why, of that ending. Now, we already know there is a sequel to 28 Years Later called 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, directed by Nia DaCosta. That's already been filmed. Apparently that's coming out in January of 2026. There's a third planned movie that's not been shot yet. I think they're waiting to see what the box office returns of the first and second movie are going to be. Hopefully we'll get to see that third one. But anyway, this movie ends, and I think it's very much setting up the Bone Temple, the next movie. We can pretty much infer from the cross that the lead Jimmy, played by Jack O'Connell, the cross that he's wearing is the cross that young Jimmy, in the prologue of the movie, is given by what we assume, or what I think is his dad, the clergyman, the minister, if you will, in the opening prologue. In this prologue that's set in the first couple of days of the outbreak, we see young Jimmy's mum, friends, family pretty much get torn apart by the infected in front of his eyes. We see what I think is his dad, who is also a minister, also get torn apart by the infected, but just before that happens, he gives him that cross. In that opening prologue, Jimmy's dad, young Jimmy's dad, is very much kind of, religious, fanatic, kind of cultish almost about welcoming the infected rushing through to kill him. So it's quite a traumatic opening, and it's bookended by the odd ending. Throughout the movie, we see the name Jimmy, great name by the way, we see that name painted on the side of walls, graffitied here and there. We see it carved into the torso of the recently deceased, soon-to-be infected folks in an almost ritualistic, sacrificial, torture-y type manner. So there's definite foreshadowing throughout the movie of Jimmy, but it doesn't really tell you anything about it until the end. And even at the end, it doesn't tell you anything, it just shows you some weird shit. And let's not forget, Cillian Murphy's character in the original 28 Days Later is called Jim, short for Jimmy. And there's a few scenes in the middle of that movie where he is wearing a tracksuit, not too dissimilar to the tracksuit worn by the Jimmy Gang. So could 28 Days Later, Cillian Murphy Jim, be connected to the Jimmy Gang? I actually don't think so. I think that's just a random coincidence, but you never know. It could be something. Also, Aaron Taylor-Johnson's character is called Jamie, which is short for James. Jimmy is also short for James. So that's probably nothing, but you never know. Perhaps Aaron Taylor-Johnson's Jamie, prior to the events of this movie, was connected to the Jimmy Gang. Maybe he is a former member of the Jimmy Gang who now goes by Jamie. That one's a bit of a stretch, as I said, but it could be. What I don't think is a coincidence is the Jimmy Savile cosplay. Now, let's get into that. Jimmy Savile, for those who don't know, which is probably anyone not from the UK and not over the age of 35. Jimmy Savile was a very famous, very popular radio DJ, TV personality in the 70s, 80s, and kind of 90s. Like, I remember him as a kid growing up in the 80s and 90s. He was known for his, like, outlandish, gaudy jewellery, famous for his tracksuits and his kind of, like, cigar holder, smoker type thing, his long bleach blonde hair. Yeah, he had a distinct look. Like I said, he was a TV personality. He hosted Top of the Pops, which was like, the music chart show here in the UK for a couple of decades. He had a show called Jim'll Fix It, which was kind of like a Make-A-Wish type show where like kids would write in and ask Jim to fix something for them. Like maybe their family was going through some trouble or somebody was ill and they were desperate to meet a famous footballer or meet their favourite pop star, things like that. So he was very, very popular and very famous in the 80s, 70s, 80s, and I think 90s here in the UK. He died in 2011, I think, and then not too long after his death, stories started to come out about his predatory nature. It's quite dark stuff. I'm not going to delve too much into that, but I will link to some articles in the description below. Suffice to say, his reputation as a child-friendly, family-friendly TV personality was well and truly gone, and his true nature was revealed. So why would these guys in this post-apocalyptic zombie world dress up like Jimmy Savile? Well, in the 28 Days Later universe, pop culture, society in general, ended as we know it in 2002, I think it was. So nothing beyond that as we know it happened in this universe. So as far as the 28 Days world is concerned, Jimmy Savile was never ousted as the predator that he was. He was just a beloved TV personality with a very, very distinct look. And if you grew up in the 80s and 90s, like young Jimmy here, like young Jack O'Connell in this movie would have done, then you would know Jimmy Savile. You would know the Teletubbies. You would know the Power Rangers, things like that. So this, combined with other things, probably plays a part in the hero/saviour complex that perhaps Jack O'Connell's Jimmy and his gang have. Geography might also be playing a part in the whole Jimmy Savile element here. The island community in the story is believed to be Holy Island. Jimmy Savile had a cottage in Glencoe, the gateway to the Highlands in Scotland. According to Google Maps, that's about a 3-day walk. So, in theory, Spike could be leaving his island community and he could have been walking for a few days, walking inland and north towards the Highlands and got to the area where Jimmy Savile's cottage was. Now, in real life, this cottage, I think, has been demolished and bulldozed down. After the news broke about the type of person that Jimmy Savile was, it was getting vandalised here and there, and I think the authorities just decided to tear it down. But in the 28 years later universe, that wouldn't have happened. So, in theory, Spike has walked to Glencoe, where Jimmy Savile's cottage was. The Jimmys, that could be their area, that could be their territory, so to speak. Other things that would have been popular for a kid at that time would have been the Power Rangers, which would explain the ludicrous fighting style of the Jimmy gang. The blocking of that scene very much looked like an episode of the Power Rangers. Teletubbies as well. I'm pretty sure he wears the Teletubby tiara at one point. We do see young Jimmy watching the Teletubbies the day of the outbreak, or at least, the day that his family is killed. I don't think that's a coincidence either. I think Jimmy's fond memories of those things, of the Power Rangers, of Jimmy Savile, of Teletubbies, all of that stuff, he'll be drawing on them to create his adult persona, his adult psychological makeup. So the character of Jimmy has probably taken all of these things that he remembers from his pre-Rage virus childhood. Jimmy Savile, Power Rangers, Teletubbies, parkour, all of these things. Add to that him dealing with the horrible trauma of watching his parents be mauled and teared apart by rage-infested zombies. Add all these things up, and you get the cult of personality that is the Jimmy gang. One thing's for sure, it's definitely an odd way to end the movie. Perhaps it's designed to bridge the gap between 28 years later and the Bone Temple. Perhaps the Bone Temple is going to be a bit of a tonal shift. It's going to be a bit more weird and off the wall and deal with, cults and the kind of the different communities of people that exist in this post-apocalyptic 28 years later world. All we've really seen is the one community, the Holy Island community that Spike is from, which has benefited from being quite cut off from the mainland. We don't know what type of communities have evolved in mainland rage virus infected UK. It could be a bit crazy Mad Maxy type people, along with the Jimmy Gang. Who knows? Hopefully we'll find out more in 28 years later, the Bone Temple, and then even more in the proposed third movie. It hasn't been greenlit yet, but fingers crossed. I'm very, very intrigued to see where all this goes. I do hope that they answer all of the questions that they ask in this movie. So that's my take on the end of 28 years later. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll catch you in the next video.